The sleek gray leather chairs were arranged neatly around the long, polished wooden table that reflected the overhead lights like a mirror. The massive LED screen on the wall still displayed the company logo. Late afternoon sunlight poured through the floor-to-ceiling windows, bathing the bustling Dallas skyline below in golden hues, a city that never waits for the weak. My name is Caroline Fletcher. I was sitting in my usual spot, the far end of the table. Laptop open, fingers typing steadily, taking notes the way I always did during these quarterly board meetings. Silent, careful, almost invisible. This company is my family's entire life. My grandfather built it from nothing, pouring every penny he'd saved into opening a single small gym in Dallas back in the 80s when no one believed fitness could ever be a serious business. My father carried on that dream, turning it into a chain of 40 high-end fitness and wellness centers spanning Texas and neighboring states. Places where the wealthiest clients come for state-of-the-art gyms, yoga and Pilates studios, luxury spa treatments, and nutrition coaching personalized down to the smallest detail. And my brother Dylan has always been the one everyone assumed would inherit it all. What about me? I was just the little sister handed the soft stuff: yoga classes, women's wellness programs, things that sounded nice but weren't considered heavy enough to sit at the real power table. At least, that's how they saw me. But today was different. The air in the room was thick with tension. Everyone around the table leaned slightly forward, eyes fixed ahead, because Dylan was about to present the biggest expansion plan in the company's history. A plan that had been hyped as the move that would usher Fletcher Fitness and Wellness into a whole new era. If you're new to this channel and you love real family drama where money, power, and blood ties collide hard, hit subscribe, turn on notifications, and drop a like right now. Trust me, this story only gets crazier from here. Think you can guess what's about to happen when my brother stands up? Dylan strode to the front with that confident walk he'd perfected over years of being groomed as the heir. The remote clicker rested comfortably in his hand. A radiant smile spread across his face as he clicked to the first slide. Every pair of eyes in the room locked onto him, the anticipation so thick you could cut it with a knife, as if success was already guaranteed. They had no idea that in just a few minutes, everything they thought they knew about who truly holds power in this family was about to be turned upside down. A brutal shock was coming. A cold, sharp truth was about to be exposed, something no one in that room had ever dared to imagine. Who really holds the keys to this empire? And when the final secret explodes into the open, will blood ties be enough to keep everything from crumbling? Stay with me, because the next part will leave you speechless. This is real family drama, no embellishment, no sugarcoating. And it's only just beginning. Are you ready? Item 10 on the agenda was the expansion project in Texas Hill Country. Just hearing that name alone instantly shifted the atmosphere in the room. Chairs were pulled in closer. Pens froze midair. This wasn't an ordinary proposal. This was the moment everyone had been waiting for. My brother Dylan didn't hesitate for even a second. He dove straight into the presentation, his voice ringing out with that smooth authority honed over years of running company operations. This was his stage, and he owned it perfectly. Every click of the remote transitioned to the next slide with calm precision, as if he'd rehearsed this pitch hundreds of times in his head. And I have to admit, the visuals were stunning. The 3D renderings showed 10 rundown old resorts scattered across Texas Hill Country, completely transformed into ultra-luxury wellness retreats. Infinity pools opening onto rolling hill views, outdoor yoga decks nestled among centuries-old oak trees, private spa villas equipped with cold plunges, infrared saunas, and floor-to-ceiling glass walls that erase the line between nature and indulgence. There were dedicated detox zones with custom juice bars, serene meditation gardens, and recovery suites that looked more like five-star sanctuaries than fitness centers. Every building bore the Fletcher logo in sleek minimalist lettering, understated yet screaming class and money. It was beautiful. It was ambitious. And it was mesmerizing. Dylan laid out the numbers with ice-cold clarity. Total investment $100 million. No hesitation, no apology, just the facts. He walked through the phased rollout over 24 months. The first 30 million would be dispersed in just a few weeks for property acquisitions permits and initial paperwork. The revenue growth projections were bold but not reckless. He talked about doubling the wellness division within 3 years, capitalizing on the post-pandemic explosion in demand for high-end recovery retreats. This wasn't just growth. This was building an empire. My father sat at the head of the table, hands clasped, nodding steadily with each slide. Pride was written all over his face, the kind of emotion he rarely showed. Every few slides he'd murmur approval under his breath. Those small reactions carried enormous weight, and Dylan lived for those moments. My mother leaned forward, hands tightly clasped, a smile never leaving her lips. Her eyes followed every word Dylan said, as if the future of the entire family was being written right before her. When Dylan paused for questions, my sister Morgan was the first to speak. She'd flown in from Houston just for this meeting, and her voice carried the certainty of someone who knew exactly which way the tide was turning. "This is real vision, Dylan," she said. "Exactly the bold move we need to stay ahead." The CFO Nancy scrolled through the projections on her tablet, finger moving slowly downward. She gave a slight nod, a rare gesture. "The assumptions are aggressive," she said, "but the financial structure is tight." Uncle Bruce, who'd been with the company since the early days when it was just one cramped gym and a dream, leaned back in his chair and cracked a rare smile. "Market analysis is solid," he said. "Hill Country is the right call." One by one, the other board members chimed in. Most were longtime friends of my father, men who'd watched Dylan grow up and long ago decided he was the heir apparent. They talked about putting Fletcher on the national map, far beyond regional fame. The energy in the room kept building. Laughter broke out when Dylan showed a slide comparing our current centers to the upcoming resorts. He joked that once members experienced Hill Country, they'd never want to leave. Someone suggested naming a signature yoga program after grandfather Fletcher. The idea was met with enthusiastic agreement. Dylan handled every comment with effortless charm. He teased upcoming partnerships, celebrity trainers, renowned organic chefs, major influencers in the wellness space. He hinted at exclusive premium membership tiers that would sell out in days. Everything was too perfect, too smooth, too persuasive. No one looked at me. No one asked for my input on the day-to-day wellness operations, the very division I ran, the detox protocols, the long-term recovery models, the operational pressures hidden behind the glossy images. I didn't interrupt. I didn't raise my hand. I just kept typing, recording every number, every promise, every round of applause, every approving nod. Because on the surface, everything really did look perfect. And that's exactly what made it dangerous. From my position, silent, observant, overlooked, I was already starting to see the cracks beneath the shine, the stacked assumptions, the risks masked by confidence. But in that moment, no one cared. Dylan stood there basking in the admiration, completely unaware that the very presentation earning him all this praise was quietly paving the way for a much bigger explosion. Because sometimes the most perfect-looking plans hide the most brutal blind spots, and not a single person in that room had any idea what was coming next. I spoke up for the first time that day. I raised my hand just enough to get attention and kept my voice steady. "I have a couple of questions about the risk side. If the bank delays the $20 million loan portion because of rising interest rates, or if renovation costs overrun due to inflation in materials and labor, what's the specific contingency plan?" Dylan paused mid-click, turned toward me, and the smile that spread across his face was the widest, most condescending one he'd shown all meeting. Then he let out a loud laugh that made the whole room go quiet, everyone waiting to see what came next. "Caroline, you're still the same," he said, voice pitched high with mockery. "Always seeing problems instead of opportunities. You're great at leading yoga and Pilates classes, handling the women's wellness side. Those soft, gentle things are your strength. But that's also your weakness. Running $100 million expansion scaling up like this takes hard vision, decisive thinking. Not worrying about women's stuff the way you do." Dad burst out laughing right after him, nodding vigorously. "Dylan's right. You don't have the experience yet for projects at this level." Morgan joined in with a light chuckle, adding quickly, "Don't worry, Dylan's got it all covered." A ripple of softer laughter moved around the table. Uncle Bruce shifted in his seat but stayed silent. Nancy looked down at her tablet. The rest of the board members smiled awkwardly, some glancing my way, others avoiding eye contact altogether. No one pushed back. No one said a word in my defense. I sat there without reacting, feeling the public humiliation spread like heat across my skin, my pulse picking up speed. But I kept my expression neutral, hands still on the keyboard. Dylan shrugged, still grinning, and turned back to the screen as if that settled everything. Anyway, let's move on to the timeline. The meeting continued like nothing had happened, but the air had changed. The easy praise flowed again, yet every time someone agreed with Dylan, I could feel their glances flick toward me, curious, uncomfortable, or dismissive. I didn't say another word for the rest of the presentation. Exactly 10 minutes after his laugh filled the room, I stood up. I walked to the head of the table without a word, plugged my laptop into the projector port, and opened the investment file I'd had ready for months. The screen lit up with the full funding breakdown. $80 million, the vast majority of the capital, traced directly back to the private fund I controlled entirely through my investment manager, Thomas Reed. I looked around the table and spoke evenly. "I'm withdrawing that $80 million effective immediately. I no longer have confidence in the person running this project." The silence that followed was absolute. Dylan's lingering smirk froze and vanished. Dad's face drained of color, his knuckles turning white as he gripped the armrests. Mom's mouth fell open, eyes wide in total disbelief. Morgan stammered the first words anyone managed. What are you talking about?" Dylan shot to his feet, face flushing deep red, but when he opened his mouth, only choked sounds came out at first. He finally forced out, "You can't. This isn't." Nancy was the quickest to understand. She stared at the screen, then whispered, "Oh my God. No way." Uncle Bruce leaned back, slowly, eyebrows raised high. Walter, Dad's old law school friend, adjusted his glasses and studied the documents now displayed in full detail, the shell entities, the consortium structure, every dollar routed through holdings I owned outright. No one else moved. I let the quiet stretch just long enough, then continued in the same calm tone. "I've been the primary backer from the beginning. I structured it this way because I wanted to see if the project could stand on its own merits without family dynamics getting in the way. My team did full due diligence and the concept had potential, so I approved the funding." Dylan found his voice again, louder now, almost shouting. "This is insane. You're bluffing? The money came through a legitimate investor group." "It came through my holdings," I cut in quietly. "The group was put together to hide that fact. You signed every agreement without ever asking who actually controlled the capital." Dad finally spoke, voice tight with anger and shock. "Caroline, stop this right now. Whatever point you're trying to make, I'm not making a point, Dad. I'm exercising my right as the majority investor. After what was just said in this room, I'm no longer willing to risk my money on someone who dismisses valid concerns as weakness." Morgan looked back and forth between us, shaking her head. "You've been bankrolling this whole thing. Why didn't you ever say anything? Because I didn't want credit?" I answered. "I wanted the project to succeed for the company. I was happy to stay in the background while everyone praised the visionary leadership. but being told in front of the entire board that my experience doesn't count because it's soft and women's stuff, that's where I draw the line. The room stayed frozen. No one jumped in to defend Dylan this time. No laughter. No nods of agreement. I closed the file, unplugged my laptop, and sat back down. The withdrawal authorization had already been sent to Thomas Reed before the meeting even started. By close of business today, the money would be gone. By late afternoon that same day, the phones at headquarters started ringing nonstop. The bank called first. A senior loan officer voice, clipped and formal, informed Nancy that they were immediately suspending the $20 million commitment. The primary funding source had vanished, and without it, they weren't moving forward. Minutes later, the lead partner on the Hill Country renovation project was on the line. He was furious, demanding cancellation of the preliminary agreements and full reimbursement for the site surveys, architectural renderings, and permitting work already paid for close to $3 million out of pocket. Word spread fast inside the building. Staff whispered in hallways. Executives canceled their afternoon schedules. Then Dylan came storming down the executive corridor. He shoved open the door to my small office without knocking, slammed it shut behind him hard enough to rattle the framed photos on the wall. His face was flushed, deep red eyes wild. "What the hell did you just do?" he yelled, leaning over my desk. "You think you can destroy everything we've worked for because of some hurt feelings?" I stayed seated, hands folded in front of me, and waited. He paced in tight circles, voice rising. "That project is dead now. The bank pulled out. The contractors are threatening lawsuits. Do you have any idea what this means for the company? For all of us?" When I didn't respond right away, he stopped and gripped the edge of my desk, the anger cracked, shifting to something desperate. "Caroline, please. Fix this. Call whoever you need to. Tell them it was a mistake. This expansion, it's my whole vision. It's the future of Fletcher Fitness. You can't just kill it like this." I met his eyes without blinking. "You stood in front of the entire board and told them my experience doesn't matter because it's soft and women's stuff. You laughed about it. Everyone laughed with you." He flinched but pushed back. "That was just talk. You know I didn't mean." "You meant every word I said," quietly. "And now you're learning what happens when you treat the person bankrolling your vision like she doesn't understand business." He tried again, voice dropping lower, almost pleading. "We're family. This affects Mom, Dad, Morgan, everyone who works here. Years of growth down the drain because you're upset." I leaned forward slightly. "You made it clear where I stand in this family. I'm simply acting accordingly." He stared at me for a long moment, breathing hard, searching for something that would change my mind. When nothing came, he straightened up, defeat creeping into his posture for the first time I could remember. "You're really not going to reverse it?" he said, more statement than question. "No, not $1. He turned, yanked the door open, and left without another word. The slam echoed down the empty hallway. That night in my apartment across town, my phone would not stop ringing. The first call came from Dylan. He started loud, accusing me of betrayal, throwing every curse he could think of, saying I had ruined everything he'd built over years. His voice cracked with rage, words tumbling over each other. Then, just as suddenly, the tone shifted. He went quiet for a second, and when he spoke again, it was lower, almost broken. "Please, Caroline, this project is everything to me. It's the legacy I was supposed to leave. You're tearing apart the whole family over one comment." I let him talk. He kept going, voice rising and falling between desperation and disbelief. "Think about what Grandfather would say if he saw us fighting like this. You're throwing away his life's work." When he finally paused, I answered calmly. "You had your chance to show respect in front of the board. You chose to mock me instead. I'm done funding that." He begged for another minute, promising he'd apologize publicly, that he'd change how he talked about my role. I ended the call without agreeing to anything. Dad rang less than 5 minutes later. His voice carried that familiar, commanding edge he'd used since I was a child. No greeting, straight to orders. Caroline, you will contact Thomas Reed tonight and reverse this withdrawal. Do you realize the damage you've caused? This isn't just about Dylan, it's the future of everything grandfather built from nothing. He didn't raise his voice much, but every word was heavy with authority and disappointment. We've already lost the bank line. Partners are pulling out. You're risking jobs, reputations, decades of growth, all because you took something personally. I waited until he finished. Dad, I funded 80% of that expansion quietly for years. I never asked for recognition. But today, you sat there and let everyone dismiss my input because it didn't fit the image of hard leadership you value. He tried to interrupt, but I kept going. I'm not reversing it. The decision stands. He switched tactics, voice softening just enough to sound hurt. This isn't the daughter I raised. Family comes first. I hung up. The last call was from Morgan. She started strong, defending Dylan completely. How could you do this? You're being selfish, Caroline. Pure revenge because he bruised your ego. Dylan's worked his entire career for this moment and you're destroying it over words. She went on about unity, about how outsiders would see us falling apart, how Mom was crying at home. Then I told her the full number, 80 million, my money, my choice. The line went quiet. After a long pause, her voice changed. No more accusations. Just a heavy sigh. You were really the one behind it all this time. Yes. Another silence. When she spoke again, it was softer, almost resigned. I didn't know. I replied the same way I had to the others. I gave him the stage. He used it to put me down in front of everyone who matters. I don't owe any of you more than I've already given. She didn't argue further. Just another sigh and a quiet goodbye. I turned the phone face down after that. No more calls came. 1 week later, we gathered again in the same boardroom for an emergency session. The mood was nothing like the excitement of the previous meeting. No one smiled. Papers rustled quietly as people took their seats, avoiding eye contact. Nancy stood first and delivered the financial update in a flat, precise tone. She laid out the numbers without emotion, over $15 million in immediate penalties from signed contracts that now had to be broken, accelerated repayment demands from existing bank loans triggered by the funding collapse, and the urgent need to sell 8 underperforming gym locations just to generate enough cash flow to keep operations stable through the next quarter. She clicked through spreadsheets showing projected shortfalls, legal exposure, and the hit to our credit lines that would make any future borrowing far more expensive. Uncle Bruce spoke next, voice steady but sharp. He asked Dylan directly why no one had ever verified the true ownership behind the majority investor group. Basic due diligence on a commitment this size. How was that missed? Walter followed, pushing harder on the same point. The agreements were clear about ongoing approval rights. Did anyone on the operations side even read the contingency clauses before committing us to millions in deposits? Dylan sat across the table, hands folded tightly in front of him, offering short answers that explained nothing. He claimed the structure had been presented as locked in, that the advisors assured him it was solid. No one looked convinced. When the discussion turned to leadership accountability, Uncle Bruce made the motion to remove Dylan from his executive role, effective immediately. Walter seconded it without hesitation. The vote went around the table quickly. Enough hands raised to pass it. Dad fought until the end. His voice shook with a mix of fury and helplessness as he argued that one mistake shouldn't erase years of contribution, that the family needed to handle this internally, that punishing Dylan this way would only weaken us further. But the numbers were already in. The motion carried. Dylan stayed silent through the entire vote, head down, shoulders slumped. For the first time in any meeting I could remember, he had nothing to say. No defense, no comeback. He looked completely defeated. I attended as required but never opened my mouth. I just listened while the consequences played out exactly as they had to. The session wrapped up with instructions for transition plans and legal next steps. People filed out quietly, no handshakes, no small talk. 3 months went by in a blur. I formally resigned from the board and sold my inherited shares back to the company at fair market value. The paperwork was straightforward, the transaction clean. No negotiations, no emotional discussions. After that, I cut off all contact with Dad, Mom, Dylan, and Morgan. Calls went unanswered. Messages stayed unread. I skipped the usual family holiday gatherings, choosing quiet evenings alone instead. Dylan struggled to find new work. His reputation had taken a serious hit. Word traveled fast in the tight Texas business circles. Months passed with no solid offers. Eventually, he moved back in with our parents, something no one had imagined would ever happen. Fletcher Fitness and Wellness scaled down hard. From 40 locations, they were left with 28 after the forced sales. The brand lost its dominant regional standing, slipping behind competitors who capitalized on the vacuum. I poured everything into my own fund and started planning an independent chain of wellness centers. The designs were sharper, the programming more innovative, the financial backing entirely mine. Early partners showed strong interest. Looking back, the lesson is simple and brutal. When you belittle someone close to you just because of gender or birth order, you risk losing far more than money. You can destroy the very legacy your family spent generations building. Grandfather Fletcher started with one gym and a dream. In the end, the people who were supposed to protect that dream were the ones who helped tear it apart.